John?
Sandra, now let's bring in Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher from the great state of Wisconsin, member of the House Armed Services Committee, a retired Marine Corps captain. Congressman, thank you again for your services. We await the White House briefing here. Your thoughts on what we know so far about the call between Presidents Biden and Putin?
Well, I hope we're going to hear specifics from this administration on what they intend to do to restore our deterrent posture in Ukraine, because it's clear to me that our deterrent posture is collapsing, and it has been for quite some time. I do think the decision to waive sanctions on Nord Stream 2 emboldened Vladimir Putin. It was a massive geopolitical gift to Vladimir Putin to make the Europeans more dependent upon Russian energy production. At the same time, the Biden administration is waging war on domestic energy production here in America. But it's not just that. They're considering dangerous changes to our nuclear policy that have our European allies extremely worried. And the summer summit that Putin and Biden had earlier was a massive propaganda victory for Putin. They discussed cyber attacks, but it's clear that Putin has done nothing to crack down on cyber attacks. So across the board, we look very weak, and Russia is exploiting our weakness. So we need to change course before it's too late.
You know, in terms of the Nord Stream pipeline and just basically Russia supplying energy to Western Europe, I was wondering how much leverage Putin does have over Germany and other nations like that, because Ukraine is not a NATO nation, so an attack against Ukraine would not invoke Article 5. So any response on the part of the Europeans would be voluntary. Putin has got his hand on the valve that supplies 50 to 75% of Germany, our most powerful allies, natural gas. Just a delay in the certification of Nord Stream saw natural gas prices jump 17% across Europe. So if Putin wanted to, I mean, he's got his hand on the valve. He can say, look, I'm going into Ukraine, and if you say anything about it, I'm going to turn off that valve. How much leverage does that give him?
Well, I think it gives him enormous leverage, which in my mind is an argument for not increasing the amount of leverage he has over our European allies and doing everything we can to wean them off their dependency on Russian energy. Particularly at a time of American energy ascendance, it makes no sense to discourage domestic production while encouraging Russian production. And that's what the Biden administration did. So I think we need to have a frank conversation with our European allies that if they want us to stand with them, they need to wean themselves off that dependency. And going forward, we need to do everything we can to arm Ukraine to the teeth. We know that the Biden administration delayed on some of the requests for lethal assistance that the Defense Department submitted. Ranking Member Mike Rogers here on the Armed Services Committee sent a letter before Thanksgiving pointing out all of the delays and asking the Biden administration to answer some basic questions. This White House is not acting with a sense of urgency, and we are about to see a massive disaster in Ukraine if we don't change things quickly.
You mentioned Mike Rogers, your colleague there from the great state of Alabama on the House Armed Services Committee. Here's what he said in a press release about arming Ukraine. He said there's an old Leninist adage that Putin lives by: probe with bayonets. If you encounter mush, proceed. If you encounter steel, stop. The time to accelerate the flow of steel in the form of heavy weapons to Ukraine was weeks ago. Every day that you hesitate in doing so only invites further aggression. The world is watching, Mr. President. Ukraine has been begging the United States for more weapon to fend off Russia, either to deter an invasion or to counter it, should it happen. What should the U.S. be giving Ukraine right now?
Well, the primary needs are for anti-tank weapons, air defense weapons, as well as anti-ship weapons. And there's a lot we can do to arm them right now. And on the question of U.S. troops, it should be noted that we already have thousands of U.S. personnel on the ground. And so we need to know what the plan is for protecting our troops and our personnel that are there. We don't want to find ourselves in another Afghanistan situation. And on the subject of Afghanistan, I do think it is fair to say that the absolute fiasco and embarrassing surrender in Afghanistan has contributed to this sense of mush on the world stage, to use that Leninist adage that if you confront the United States, you're going to confront mush. We need to put some steel in the spine of American foreign policy. Otherwise, we won't just be talking about Afghanistan. We won't just be talking about Ukraine. Sooner rather than later, we're going to be talking about the loss of Taiwan, and that really means the loss of U.S. global leadership.
Yeah, there was mush in Crimea as well, so perhaps Putin is thinking about that, though the threat of being kicked out of the SWIFT system might make him think twice. We'll see. Congressman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin, good to talk to you. Thanks for spending time with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sandra.
All right, still awaiting that briefing there at the White